Surveys have found that up to 2/3 of Americans feel they're living paycheck to paycheck, including one finding that nearly half consider themselves broke.
We have to work maybe harder, but I think hard work is not enough anymore.
Americans say they're struggling to manage their finances because of high inflation, salaries not keeping up with the rising cost of living, and heavy debt.
In the land of the free and home of the brave, a silent struggle is unfolding as millions of Americans find themselves trapped in a vicious cycle of financial insecurity and desperation. From the bustling streets of New York to the rolling hills of California, the specter of living paycheck to paycheck haunts the lives of countless hardworking men and women, casting a shadow of fear and uncertainty over their futures. This is not a problem confined to the margins of society, but a pervasive and growing crisis that threatens to undermine the very foundations of the American dream. The numbers are as staggering as they are sobering. According to a recent report by Career Builder, a shocking 78% of American workers are living paycheck to paycheck, with little to no savings to fall back on in case of an emergency. 17% said they usually live paycheck to paycheck, and 23% said they always do. This means that nearly 8 out of every 10 people in the workforce are just one missed paycheck away from financial ruin, a precarious existence that leaves them vulnerable to even the smallest of setbacks. The situation is particularly dire for those at the lower end of the income spectrum. A study by the Federal Reserve found that 40% of Americans would struggle to come up with just $400 in the event of an unexpected expense, such as a car repair or medical bill. This is a stark reminder of the fragility of many households' finances and the razor-thin margin for error that separates stability from chaos. Even more alarming is the fact that this crisis is not confined to the working poor, but extends deep into the middle class. A survey by the American Payroll Association revealed that 72% of employees would find it challenging to meet their financial obligations if their paycheck was delayed by just 1 week. This suggests that even those with seemingly stable jobs and decent incomes are living on the edge, with little to no cushion to absorb the shocks of life. Whether or not you have significant wealth, everyone is feeling squeezed. Most Americans are basically living in survival mode. In this video, we will delve into the underlying causes of this pervasive financial insecurity and explore its multifaceted impact on individuals and families across the nation. We'll examine the systemic issues that have led to this precarious situation, including stagnant wages, rising living costs, and inadequate social safety nets. The roots of this crisis are complex and multifaceted, but they can be traced back to a perfect storm of economic and social factors that have been building for decades. At the heart of the problem is the stagnation of wages, which have failed to keep pace with the rising cost of living for much of the past 40 years. The U.S. Consumer Price Index is at a current level of 313.22, up from 313.21 last month and up from 303.36 1 year ago. This is a change of 0.01% from last month and 3.25% from 1 year ago. According to data from the Economic Policy Institute, the average hourly wage for American workers, when adjusted for inflation, has barely budged since the 1970s, even as the costs of housing, healthcare, and education have skyrocketed. This wage stagnation has been compounded by the erosion of traditional employer-provided benefits, such as pensions and healthcare, which have been steadily replaced by 401k plans and high-deductible health insurance policies that shift more of the cost burden onto workers. At the same time, the decline of unions and the rise of contract and temporary work have left many Americans without the job security and bargaining power they once enjoyed, making it harder to negotiate for better pay and benefits. But perhaps the biggest driver of the paycheck-to-paycheck crisis is the relentless rise in the cost of living, which has far outpaced the meager gains in wages for most workers. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the annual average consumer price index, or CPI, which measures the average change in prices paid by urban consumers for goods and services, was 224.939 in 2011 and 304.702 in 2023. This represents an inflation rate of 35.5% over 12 years. This subliminally means that the purchasing power of the average worker's paycheck has been steadily eroded over time, making it harder and harder to make ends meet. The impact of this erosion can be seen in every aspect of American life, from the struggle to afford basic necessities like food and housing to the crushing burden of debt that weighs down so so many households. According to a recent Federal Reserve Bank of New York report, consumer debt reached $14.56 trillion after the fourth quarter of 2020. The debt for Q4 was up $414 billion from the previous year and up nearly $1.9 trillion over the previous record high of $12.68 trillion in the third quarter of 2008, with the average American household owing $145,000 in mortgage, credit card, and student loan debt. This debt burden is not only a drag on individual finances, but a major impediment to economic growth and social mobility, as it limits consumers' ability to spend and invest in their futures. The recession that struck Americans 15 years ago threw millions out of work and destroyed nest eggs, and after recovery had things looking much brighter. Consumer debt leveled and even slightly dipped from 2008 to 2012. The COVID pandemic threw sand into the economy's gears. Many people, ironically workers, have been forced into insolvency or foreclosure, unable to pay their obligations or provide for their families. For those living paycheck to paycheck, the consequences of this debt burden can be devastating. With little to no savings to fall back on, even a minor financial setback can quickly spiral into a full-blown crisis, forcing families to choose between paying the rent or putting food on the table. In a Bankrate website survey, 56% of Americans cannot afford a $1,000 emergency expense, and over 35% say they would borrow the money in some form. That includes 21% who say they would finance it with a credit card and pay it off over time to cover the expense, down from 25% in 2023. Furthermore, 10% would borrow the money from family or friends, and 4% say they would take out a personal loan. Just 16% say they would reduce spending on other things to cover a $1,000 unexpected expense. This lack of financial resilience is not only a source of immense stress and anxiety for millions of Americans, but also a major risk factor for a host of social and health problems. Studies have shown that financial insecurity is linked to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues, as well as physical ailments like heart disease and diabetes. In a report by the American Psychological Association, 72% of adults say they felt stressed about money at least some of the time, with 22% saying they felt extreme stress about their finances. The paycheck-to-paycheck crisis is not only a personal tragedy for those caught in its grip, but also a major drag on the broader economy. When consumers are struggling to make ends meet and have little discretionary income to spend, it can lead to a vicious cycle of reduced demand, slower economic growth, and further wage stagnation. According to a study by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, low-income households tend to spend a larger share of their income on goods and services than high-income households, meaning that when their finances are squeezed, it can have a ripple effect throughout the economy. Moreover, the financial insecurity of so many Americans is not just an economic issue, but also a political and social one. In a country where the American dream is predicated on the idea that hard work and determination can lead to prosperity and upward mobility, the reality of widespread financial struggle can breed disillusionment, anger, and resentment. In a survey by the Pew Research Center, 70% of Americans said that the economic system in the country unfairly favors powerful interests, while only 36% said it was generally fair to most Americans. This sense of economic injustice and inequality has fueled much of the political and social unrest of recent years, from the rise of populist movements on both the left and the right to the growing calls for systemic change and reform. According to a report by the Economic Policy Institute, wages for the top 1% have skyrocketed by 160% since 1979, while the share of wages for the bottom 90% has shrunk. This growing gap between the haves and have-nots has led to a sense of frustration and anger among many Americans who feel like they are being left behind by an economic system that is rigged against them. Unfavorable government policies in the country are not helping the matter. The limitations of unemployment benefits, healthcare, and other assistance programs play a significant role in perpetuating financial instability among American households. While these programs are designed to provide a safety net for those facing job loss, illness, or other hardships, they often fall short of meeting the real needs of struggling families. According to a report by the National Employment Law Project, the average weekly unemployment benefit in the United States is just $378, replacing only about 40% of a worker's lost wages. This is hardly enough to cover basic living expenses, particularly in high-cost areas where rent and other necessities can quickly drain savings. Moreover, many states have strict eligibility requirements and time limits on unemployment benefits, leaving many workers without any support at all when they need it most. The situation is even more dire when it comes to healthcare. Despite the gains made by the Affordable Care Act, millions of Americans still lack access to affordable, quality health insurance. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, 25.6 million non-elderly individuals were uninsured in 2022, with low-income and minority communities disproportionately affected. Even for those with insurance, high deductibles, co-payments, and out-of-pocket costs can quickly drain savings and lead to medical debt. In a survey by the Commonwealth Fund, 51% of working-age adults reported having difficulty paying their medical bills or were paying off medical debt over time. The impact of job insecurity on financial stability cannot be overstated. In an economy where layoffs, downsizing, and precarious work arrangements have become increasingly common, many workers live in constant fear of losing their income and falling behind on bills. This lack of job security can have a devastating impact on workers' ability to plan for the future, save for emergencies, and invest in their own skills and education. In a survey by the Pew Research Center, 54% of adults in households with annual incomes below $30,000 reported having no savings at all, compared to just 10% of those in households with incomes of $75,000 or more. This lack of savings leaves low-income workers particularly vulnerable to even small financial shocks, such as a car repair or unexpected medical bills. The combination of limited assistance programs, job insecurity, and rising costs of living has created a perfect storm for American workers, leaving millions of households just one missed paycheck away from financial disaster. Without meaningful action to address these underlying issues, the paycheck-to-paycheck crisis will only continue to grow, threatening the stability and well-being of families and communities across the country. Policymakers, business leaders, and individuals must work together to strengthen the social safety net, improve job quality and security, and provide greater opportunities for financial empowerment and stability. This will require a fundamental rethink of economic priorities and values, and a renewed commitment to building an economy that truly works for all, else the consequences would be catastrophic. The erosion of the very pillars that have long sustained the American economy now looms large on the horizon, threatening to plunge industrious Americans into a dystopian future where the dreams of the many are sacrificed to the avarice of the few. If you like this video, hit the like button and help us spread the word. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications on our latest news and analysis. In the meantime, check out one of these videos here to learn more. Thanks for watching.